hope this video finds you doing well today. On Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, we have been supplying some content, some devotional content through our YouTube page. And on Tuesdays, we've been looking together in Isaiah's prophecy, and we're in particular looking at Isaiah, this theme in Isaiah of the suffering servant. And there are several passages in Isaiah, throughout Isaiah, that talk directly about this suffering servant, who is a mysterious figure in Isaiah's prophecy, but whom we know is the Lord Jesus Christ. And so we're coming now to our next passage, which is in Isaiah chapter 50. And so if you want to hit pause, now would be a good time to do that and go read Isaiah chapter 50 and read verses 4 through 11. Isaiah 50, verse 4 through 11, and then come back and hit play, and we'll talk about this passage. So, this suffering servant passage, what I really want to talk to you about is the transforming love of this suffering servant. We all know intuitively, instinctively, that we are made for love, and we are longing for a particular kind of love, a love that is big enough and strong enough to come into our lives and to heal us and to restore us and to change us and from the inside out, to set us free so that we can live out of an understanding that we already have all the love that we need, and we are fulfilled and satisfied in that. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about the transformative love of this servant. And there are three things in particular that I want to bring out. I want us to talk about the tender love of this servant, and then I want us to talk about the strong love of this servant, and then finally I want us to talk about the costly love of this servant. So first, the tender love of this servant. Verse 4 says that this servant knows how to sustain with a word him who is weary. We saw a very similar theme in Isaiah 42, if you watch that video, that the servant comes and a bruised reed he will not break, and a faintly burning wick he will not quench. See, what this is saying this servant's love, it moves towards the brokenhearted, moves towards the weary, moves towards the weak, moves towards the discouraged. His love is tenderly aimed at our weariness and at our weakness. You know, I was thinking about this the past couple of weeks. I've even mentioned this to some people. I say, we're living in a brave new world, which of course is a reference to Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World, with all this coronavirus stuff around. But, in Aldous Huxley's book, he wrote that his fear was man's infinite appetite for distraction. We stay busy with work and entertainment, and we seek to numb ourselves, and we seek to avoid what is real and what's really going on with us. And I want to encourage you during this time where you do have some time for quiet, and I know that there are still opportunities out there to distract you, but maybe use some of that time of quiet and stillness to not numb yourselves, but to really lean into your weakness and your weariness and your fear, and to take that to Jesus, who can sustain you with a word, whose love is aimed at your weariness and is aimed at your brokenness and your weakness. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote, "Now come as the sinner you are to your God who loves you. Go to him broken as you are, and find the healing transformation of his tender love for the weary." All right, second, the strong love of the servant. Verse 5, he says, "I turned not backward." Verse 6, this servant says, "I hid not my face from disgrace and spitting. Verse 7, I set my face like flint. This servant, as you read through this passage, this servant is going to be struck. His beard is going to be pulled out. He's going to be spit upon. His enemies are going to rise up and they're going to accuse him. But you see, verse 5, verse 6, verse 7 is telling you over and over, his love is unquitting. His love is undeterred. It is bold. It is unstoppable. It is strong. His love will not be intimidated. It won't turn backwards. A lot of us, I think, we can very quickly find ourselves spiraling down in shame and think of ourselves as too unlovable, that maybe we feel like we've messed up one too many times, that there's no way God could love me. You need to embrace this strong love of the servant. He set his face like a flint, and later when you get to the New Testament, there's an echo of that phrase in Luke chapter 9, where Luke tells us that Jesus, at that point in his ministry, he set his face to go to Jerusalem, undeterred, unquitting. He won't be stopped in his strong love, because what was awaiting him in Jerusalem were his enemies. He was going there to be accused. He was going there to be beaten and to suffer and to have his beard pulled out and to die for you. And you need to be confronted, and you and I need to be reminded of the strong love of this servant. There is no sin that is outmatched by his grace. His grace can conquer anything in our lives. His strong love. All right, last, the costly love of the servant. Verse 6 says, he says, I gave my back, which can also be translated, I determined to offer. See, this servant is saying, I'm going to offer myself. I'm going to give myself over to suffering and death for you. He came to be a sacrifice for you, to lay down his life for you. His love cost him his life. This theme, we actually talked about this on Sunday a little bit. There's this theme that runs through all of our favorite stories and books and movies and so on and so forth of sacrificial, costly love, because we understand that that's the only kind of love that can really transform us and heal us and is enough to restore us. So you think of like the Hunger Games. I read those books several years ago, and really the Hunger Games are all built around this idea that this character, Katniss Everdeen, when it came to it, she volunteered herself in the place of her younger sister, Primrose. She gave herself over to what was to be a certain death in the Hunger Games for her younger sister, and that love is transformative. We get that costly sacrificial love. Or you think of the Game of Thrones. I only made it through the first book of the Game of Thrones and never saw any of the shows, but in that first book, there's this point where Dany says to another character, I remember what you told me. Only death can pay for life. What's she talking about? She's talking about costly sacrificial death. One of my favorites, because when I was growing up, Star Wars was my favorite movies that were ever put out. And in Star Wars, there's this famous scene where Obi-Wan Kenobi, he lets his friends escape while he sacrificially gives his life for them and is struck down by Lord Vader. He stands in their place and he sacrifices himself in order that they would go free. There's a reason this theme runs through all of our favorite stories. It's because we know that only a costly sacrificial love would really transform us and set us free to live out of a place of knowing that we are loved like that. And Jesus came, and he came as the suffering servant. He came in his tender love. He came in his strong love. And he came in this costly love to lay down his life for us. And so if you want to be transformed by love, come to Jesus. Come to this suffering servant who gave his life for you. Thank you, and hope you have a good rest of your day.